Welcome to the Capstone Conversation, where you learn about what's happening in the greater East Bay. I am your host, Jared Ash. Today, we are joined by Congressman Mark DeSauliner from Contra Costa County. You are a longtime fixture here in Contra Costa County. Most people who are listening probably already know you, but tell us a little bit about what do you want people to know about you? And when they reflect on your 30 plus years of community service, what do you want people to remember and what are you the most proud of as part of your intro?
Oh, man. That's a great question. Let's see if I can answer that succinctly. I came to the East Bay to open a restaurant in Concord. At the time, I managed, part of a restaurant both in San Francisco and Palo Alto. We were going to have kids like a lot of people. The houses were affordable, so we moved to First Pleasant Hill in Concord. I also had a restaurant in Berkeley, and when I sold the restaurant in Berkeley, the local head of the Chamber of Commerce, who was a regular at the restaurant, came in and said, "Why don't you get more involved? How about being on the planning commission?" I had been on something called the Redevelopment Advisory Committee and then the Planning Commission. 2 years later, an opening on the City Council opened up, and it was a setup getting on the Planning Commission. I ran for the City Council, got elected. Then there was a vacancy on the Board of Supervisors, and I was a liberal Republican at the time. I grew up in Boston. I know anybody under 40 looks at me when I say, how is that possible? Massachusetts Ed Burke was often referred to by the Boston Globe as more liberal than the other senator from Massachusetts, Teddy Kennedy, and he was a Republican African American. There was a vacancy. I was in the city council. I was mayor at the time, and Pete Wilson was the governor, Republican. He was running for re-election. I was a small business owner, and he appointed me to that vacancy. And then I got elected 3 times subsequent to that. As the Republican Party moved further right, they really hated somebody who voted the way I did. I switched parties, ran for the assembly successfully. I was the first freshman in the history of the state of California to be the chair of the Assembly Transportation Committee. Then I was elected to the Senate, was chair of the Labor Committee and then Transportation Housing. And when George Miller retired, he and I were friends from the restaurant. Actually, I used to tease him about when I was a Republican. He used to say, "Mark, you're not supposed to vote the way you do and be a Republican. You're in the wrong part of the country and the wrong party." Then I've had this job now. I'm in my 6th term. I'm a senior member of the Education Labor Committee and my senior member of the Transportation Infrastructure Committee. And I'm the ranking Democrat on the Ethics Committee. What do I like most about it? The people, quite frankly. I think this comes from being in the restaurant business. Our staff does a great job. We answer the phone when people call. I answer phones here. And we've been able to help a lot of people who just need help. And they're frustrated by the time they call an elected official because they've tried everything else. And a lot of it is just we open a case file. I can follow the case files. We tell them what we can do to help. And it's just old time politics. I've done more town halls than any member of Congress in the last 7 years. And I love that, dealing with people. I think right now, in particular, for a variety of reasons, people just feel very isolated. So I get a lot from it by being out in the community a lot. And I feel like people appreciate it because I'm in a position of influence and responsibility. They see me as a human being. Those things I like best. I can think of bills that I've been involved with that I'm very proud of, but we can talk about that. You can tell by the background I've spent a lot of time in transportation.
Yeah, actually, I love it. Explain to the on YouTube, there's shovels behind us, golden shovels. What are these about?
Because I started as a planning commissioner in local transportation. Of course, transportation is a big issue for people in the East Bay. We have, between my congressional district and Eric Swalwell's, we have 4 of the 10 what's called mega commutes in the country. That's over a half hour and a half each way to get to work. That's a quality of life thing. That's all the time away from your kids, your spouse, in the community, and it's a real problem. All of these are from significant groundbreakings involved over the years. I'm particularly proud. A lot of, like this one, I put a lot of work into the fourth floor of the cul-de-sac. That was a very heavy lift because I had to work with my colleagues from Alameda and San Francisco who were afraid that it was going to expand urban sprawl. At the same time, I was principal in our urban growth boundary, which redirected growth back into the cities for reasonable infill growth, which you can see now, Walnut Creek. Vehicle miles traveled
PMT.
BMT, every one of those chewing gums that you can get out of traffic and get to be home faster, that's quality of life. That's what those are about. I sometimes say that the age to transportation, the process for getting aging is a wall of shovels and plaques. But they're good memories.
Yeah, let's.
Benicia Bridge, Highway 4, big expansion there to help people. E-BART was a big accomplishment that I
Right.
was very involved with.
Let's pivot back. You talked about influence and how you could help influence that. But right now that you're a Democrat and you're a member of the minority party, what is it? You've also served in Congress where you've been in the majority party in opposition to a Republican president, but you've also been there with the Democratic president. Talk about what does being in the minority mean and how has that shifted the level of influence and dollars that come back to the district?
For reasons that historians will figure out, the United States and indeed the world is very binary, whether it's our politics or the Middle East, the most binary situations for thousands of years. It's frustrating for somebody who believes in, Jefferson said, the art of politics in America will be compromised. I have very strongly felt progressive feelings. I think the country swings back and forth. Political scientists like to say that pendulum process. It's not being in the middle all the time. It's trying to go back and forth between individual responsibility and our responsibility to one another. I think we've swung way over to the right. We're trying to get back where and there's a lot of reasons for that too, starting with Reagan. I think of writing a book called The Plague would be the industrial political complex where these consultants who are unlicensed know who they are, the Rasputins and Machiavelli of our time. They live off of conflict. Very famous Democratic consultant once told me, war is good. And my response is, for German munitions manufacturers in the 30s and the 40s, and for political consultants in America right now, it has always been thus to a degree. Remember the calendar pamphlets at the beginning of the country? It's a pamphleteer, wrote outrageous things. He was the Rasputin of the founding era. What's the problem with it right now is particular, and technology is added to it because the sophistication of targeting and algorithms and social media has made it particularly bad. And also people live on a very superficial level, and life is complex. Politics can be, so it's difficult. I still get a lot done. My Republican colleagues go back Tuesday. We got to get back there Tuesday. I'll have heartfelt conversations with people I consider friends who are conservatives. But trying to get those three people to help us come compromise, which I think could easily be done if the Republicans and the president comes to their senses on health care and fiscal responsibility. But right now they're afraid to do that because they'll get primaried if they do anything that they disagree with the president of the United States. And there'll be millions of dollars spent Republican primary, which the Koch brothers have perfected 40 years. And that's part of why the Republican Party's moved, why I left. It's very binary, it's difficult, but you have to choose your fights. Say the story of Virginia Fox, who's a very conservative education committee, is now chair of the Rules Committee. She's from North Carolina, and she introduces me to new Republican members of the Education Labor Committee. This is DeSauliner. He's our favorite socialist from San Francisco. It's a running joke. I say, Virginia, by your standards, I'm a Trotsky. It is a difficult time, a compromise, but we still find ways to do it. Since January 20th, it's become exponentially on because of President Trump.
Let's talk through that. There's been a massive overhaul in the federal government under this administration. Job cuts, workers' cuts, massive changes to healthcare and education. There's a seismic shift, right? I would say this is even bigger than after September 11th, when we created a new Department of Homeland Security. You have this seismic shift going on. Highlight some of the impacts in managing the federal government related to all of that.
These are true believers. Mr. Vogt, who's in charge of the Office of Management Budget, some of the things he said over the years, he wants to traumatize public employees. He wants them to be afraid to come to work every day. Things like that. This is like a jihad for libertarian, Koch-funded people who they think it's survival of the fittest. and the private sector will take care of everything. I believe in the private sector, but it doesn't take care of everything. It's motivated by profit. I own small businesses in a very thin margin, high mortality business and restaurants. But you need to have a social contract, and that means we need responsibility. We want to take care of our neighbors so we don't have to call the police. We want to help. If there's a fire, we call the fire department. You can't, the private sector doesn't do that well because there isn't a profit margin structure. These are true believers, and it's not about managing efficiently. Doge was not about efficiency. It was cruelty and chaos. And as a person who's socially progressive, but as a former small business owner, used to be somewhat teased in the restaurant business as being a numbers guy. I want to make government work efficiently. That part of the Republican Party has been burned and driven out. And I don't understand it. Why wouldn't we all want to make sure that taxpayers' dollars are invested well and efficient, whether you're a progressive or a conservative? And they don't believe it. It's just survival of the fittest. It's cruel. And I don't know how their view of America in the long run, how do we fight 2 world wars? We couldn't have done that with private sector and survival of the fittest. And we've lost that belief in government being efficient, yes, but we need each other to survive. Humans didn't evolve because we were the biggest, strongest, fastest animal. We did it because we figured out how to work with one.
Community. That's an interesting perspective. Within that, there are massive changes about to happen. Healthcare, we just had the head of the Northern Central California Hospital Association on a podcast talking about those changes. I know you've gotten lots of briefings on that. You've got the food bank, which has met with you a number of times, talking about the changes. You're talking about changes that will last for 10 years in dramatically cutting, particularly rural hospitals and other things. So that doesn't necessarily impact your district because you're more urbanized, but it does. It's changing. There's 80% of people at the hospitals are going in on government-funded healthcare.
We just had a roundtable with all CFOs, CEOs of our health system here across the East Bay. And there was a comment from a CFO of a major hospital who said, if what they got passed in the big ugly bill, which cut 15.1 million people, according to CBO and Kaiser Family Foundation, their Medicaid, and that then it affects Medicare, affects private pay, they will go out of business. So we will see hospitals close right here. 2 days ago, I was in the emergency room at Contra Costa Regional Center. I was deciding 25 years ago as a county supervisor to build that hospital. Magnificent place. We, in this county in particular, was an urban county years ago, going up street and doing primary care, quality lifestyle changes, letting kids know you eat good food, you exercise, all those good things. You don't smoke, you don't drink, you'll be healthier. The prevention part, they're eliminated. Primary care clinics, they're eliminated. We're going to send everybody into the emergency room, and they're going to have higher acuity. They're going to be sick by the time they get. I was just with the fire chief talking about how many ambulances will be taking really sick people to the dumbest financial model I've ever seen. This is the biggest attack on Americans' healthcare system, such as it is, and it's notorious. We have 18% of the U.S. GDP goes to our health care system in the United States. That's the highest of all developed countries, and we have the worst outcomes in terms of life expectancy, high acuity for diseases. There's a lot of inefficiencies that we could get rid of. PBMs, I have a bill to get rid of them. Denials in private pay. I'm the ranking, and we're in the minority right now. I'm the chair of the Health, Employment, Labor, and Pensions Subcommittee. I spend a lot of time on this. I don't understand the madness of this. People are going to die with what they already passed and what they're proposing, right? Because they won't get the health care, and people will be getting in ambulances going to the emergency room rather than avoiding that acuity and that disease by being in primary care.
Is it just about cutting the budget? Is it they're just, hey, smaller government, the private sector will find a way?
I guess that, and to be quite frank, I think they're sociopaths. I think the President of the United States and Mr. Voigt don't have an ability to understand how average live. and the consequences.
I want to take this building community and working together concept into gun control. I know that's an issue you've cared a lot about. Historically, as I watch Congress, gun control measures can almost only get passed when one party and then it swings back, right? Democrats pass gun control measures, Republicans almost repeal them when they're back in power. How do we take a new look? If we're looking for 8 years ahead, how do we actually make a substantial change? It's not just who's ever in power and are passing a new law for 2 years.
My approach since it was a local government, and again, Contra Costa County had a state-of-the-art approaching gun violence as a public health issue. When you approach it from that and look at the research, my father committed suicide with a handgun in 1989. That started my interest before I got into politics on gun violence, but also on behavioral health. He was an alcoholic. He had mental health issues, and then the gun was there. Of the roughly 130 people on average who take their lives with guns or a victim of gun violence and death in the United States every day, 2/3 of them are suicides. What we want to do and what we've done in Contra Costa and in California and in Connecticut, if you go to Giffords, wonderful, Gabby Giffords is a friend of the Kennedy School. We were local. We became friends before what Giffords has done is they take the public health process and they analyze. When you take that approach analytically, it's not about all of these processes, by the way, have already gone through constitutional channel. Second Amendment, we're not taking Second Amendment rights. The bills that we have passed in Contra Costa that I'm proud of, many of them are my initiatives in the legislature, and I'm trying to do at the federal level, are based on how do we avoid people taking their lives in proximity to guns. People from the NRA would say they'll kill themselves anyways. That's not true. It's the availability of the guns. We've done research, extensive research in the violence prevention field. The ability to overdose is exponentially harder than a loaded gun if you already are predisposed to depression. One of the things I'm very excited about now is I have, over the years, put together a program called Not Here. And it's a combination of all the best practices are preempted at the federal level that you can do. And I'd be happy to show you, do town halls on this and slides with Giffords, where you are 35% less likely to be involved in gun violence on a school campus if you live in California, higher in Contra Costa because of our gun violence program. You are 25% less likely to be involved in gun violence in general. And you can go to Giffords and they show Connecticut and California. In Contra Costa, it's actually better because of what we've done as a public health issue. All of these have a state sword, making sure that law enforcement, because we've had problems with law enforcement. We had a fatality, famous one in San Francisco, because a homeless person grabbed a gun out of a law enforcement's trunk, was open, and shooting young girl from Pleasant on the Embarcadero. Simple things like that. I have a bill that I've done countless times I can't do in Congress. And the Department of Justice, through the testing process, shows that smart guns work with a 95% same level of success in terms of fire responding. Smart guns are the best ones are you have a palm print.
Yeah.
And they won't work unless palm print has been improved. And you can get up to 50 people on these guns. As soon as the DOJ does their test and says it works the same level of any gun, then that would be the only thing you could sell. And it's inducing more investment and close. That works fine, but over time, because of the shock, that's the part they're trying to count. There's a whole series of bills like that, including identifying at-risk people. And we use them in Contra Costa for years. So we do risk assessments where teachers can say, hey, we've got a young person we think needs a little counseling. And the sheriff and law enforcement partner with our behavioral health folks, and they'll check the person out, do risk assessment. They have stopped countless number of high-risk people by not imposing anything on them, just saying, hey, we heard from your teacher, your counselor, you're having some problems. These are the things that we should be considering. Lots of things like that. They're thoughtful, and I would recommend you can go to our website and look at our Not Here program. So you don't have to wait for the federal government.
We'll put that in the blog. We'll share that information so people can link to it and learn more. I think any resource like that is good. And I like that you're using research and thinking outside the box in terms of ways to approach things. You mentioned mental health. That comes up on a ton of conversations with most elected officials at all different levels. From your office perspective, what can Congress do? What can the federal government do to make an impact on that?
You mentioned about how we've been in the majority, we've been in the minority. I am very proud of a very big bill I put a lot of time into because of my background called Mental Health Matters. It got out of the House when we were in the majority with a Republican vote, and then it never came up in the Senate. One of the reasons I stay in Congress is to get the votes to get it passed. I spent a lot of time with Republicans, including in committee hearings with public, talking. This should be bipartisan. Let's invest in the research. It's issues around depression. I worked with a former Surgeon General in the Biden administration with research he did and CDC did about social media and algorithms are targeting adolescent kids, particularly girls, who the algorithms are picking up that are predisposed towards depression at a crucial part of their cognitive development. One of the dynamics between these two subjects, gun manufacturers and social media companies are preempted from civil lawsuits by federal protection. Why do we do that? If you just could bring a lawsuit for all the damage that the gun manufacturer has done, it's the only consumer product in the United States that's protected. It's protected because of political extortion. And then social media too. The reason for social media years ago was let's get it started so that it can build a critical mass. I'm sorry, Meta doesn't need a critical mass from a financial model. If they're targeting adolescents to bring them, as a New York Times reporter did a story on how he discovered YouTube algorithms were targeting adolescent girls so that they could go through the algorithms, bring them all the way through their depression to a YouTube that would show them how to commit suicide. He brought that up, the investigative reporter. YouTube said, "Oh, we're sorry, we didn't." They would have been more careful if they were subject to a civil lawsuit for what they were.
That's come up before in California, allowing the technology companies to be sued for.
Buffy Wicks, my favorite members of the legislature. And they did a great job this last session leading the country. California leads the way. We have a special culture. And trying to get it done, the analogy to guns.
Yeah.
Same thing with social media. Unfortunately, these industries have a lot of influence because of their financial ability, particularly on independent committees. Citizens United opened this. And that's one of the reasons we're so binary is Citizens United 5-4 decision of the Supreme Court saying that money equals free speech.
Yeah.
Please leave us a review in your favorite podcast app, share this episode, and subscribe.
I want to come back to the shovels behind us in transportation. We were actually talking before about Contra Costa leading the way in transportation. We're going to make all our listeners in Alameda and Solano get jealous now. What are some of the things that you've done to help innovate this area in your role in Congress?
I've done a lot. I'm proud of it. It goes back to being proud because we're trying to improve quality of life for individuals, meeting with two-income households in Brentwood and Antioch who bought houses they could afford, but they're going to drive to Silicon Valley or back into the financial district. It's bigger than transportation. Every transportation program, it gets mom and dad home to their kids faster and in their community. 4 on the call, E-Bar, expansion of Highway 4, and the expansion of our transit system so that all of our transit is connected more easily to heavy rail, to BART. It's all intersected. The smart mobility program I've been involved with for years, we've done such a great job at Contra Costa, really led the country in a lot of ways. Connects all of our infrastructure to the technology that monitors in real time traffic situations all the time. I'm very proud. The millions of dollars I've just gotten, that will be the first urban county, we think, in the country and the world, that every street light will have the best available technology that will connect to one central traffic management system where you'll have people 24 hours a day dealing with the technology, moving traffic, gets those people home faster, reduces cost of fuel, reduces pollution, public health. I'm really proud of that. People will be able to get home faster because the Contrast Transportation Authority and I and others have worked on this for years, and we're really ahead of the rest of the country and the world. We work with the transportation research at Berkeley and at Davis, of which I'm very proud. Got them millions of dollars to do the research that helps deploy this technology. All of those things. And we're about to announce a grant for $166 million that in the 680 corridor from Walnut Creek to Dublin, all of which I represent, which will be a state-of-the-art corridor of the United States. We mix all of this together with the infrastructure, and we'll be able to model and show people all the benefits in their lives.
This is a new one on top of the 166 million that already happened.
It has to happen because we're waiting for release from the administration, given some of the attacks. But Secretary Duffy served with me in the Transportation Infrastructure Committee. We've talked about this in public. He's offered to meet in private, so we're going to meet with him. But the business community was very involved in this. This is about people's quality of life, not party affiliation. I'm very excited about that project. All of this. But mostly what it really comes down to is that sense of all of that combines to get people who'll never know or meet for a long time, closer to their families, closer to their community, and not stuck in traffic.
One of the things that I noticed about that is Tim Hale from CCTA talks about, do you hear that, Tim? The congressman thinks you're best. You could add that to your LinkedIn.
We won't talk about Randy. His predecessor, who was also great.
Yeah. But on 680, you can, if you actively manage it through technology, they estimate that it's the equivalent to adding one lane, which would that's 20% faster commutes we're talking about.
And I had the benefit of years ago when I was a county supervisor, I was appointed to the Air District and then a CARB, and I was on the Metropolitan Transportation. Through that, I got 2 Marshall Fund grants to study what the EU was doing. And very selective. I'm very proud of that. And I was also able, because the CARB appointment, I'd negotiate California Air Resources Board credits. I mean, to meet with the Japanese there and here. And they were ahead of us on this. Learn from them. In Japan, they had a system years ago where you could get on your cell phone, program it, that you had your commute and your errands programmed. These were pilot programs then, but they brought them to scale on what the fastest route to get the next day and in real time. Now we have that on our phones, but all incorporating all of this brilliant technology in a way that's impactful to day-to-day lives. One of the biggest challenges is bringing these pilot programs to scale because you need money and you need to be smart. And we've done that.
I know education is important to you. You are very active in the House Education Committees. What do you want to accomplish in the next 5 years as education reforms? And I'm going to ask you to take a technological look that I think using AI and using new tools, schools can totally transform in this country. How do you see you can help, and what's your sort of passion going forward more than in the past?
One of my big initiatives are technology, innovation, and cognitive development, the earlier conversations. I just had a wonderful conversation with the author of the AI Con, because on the labor side, my initiative is the consequences on the workforce today. And her book, she's a linguist from the University of Washington, the AI Con is really good about, in technology, frequently, the technology from the Industrial Revolution. I grew up in Lowell, Massachusetts, listening to my grandparents talk about working in the mills there, that technologies help the investors more than the working people. So it can help everybody. We want to make sure it helps everybody, investors, but the workforce. Too often it's come at the expense of the workforce, and that's what we're seeing with AI, that they're going to just eliminate jobs. I have a bill that says you have to let the Labor Department know when you're laying people off and they're being replaced by AI, and tell us how you mitigate the community impact. We're not saying you can't. Yeah. We just want to know what the impacts are. We can, as a culture, can start to get at it. Those 2 buckets on the Educational Labor Committee are big things for me, and they're important. My interest in behavioral health. We now know through research, and a lot of it's done here in the Bay Area, particularly UCSF, and their wonderful behavioral health programs that are part of National Institutes for Health, National Behavioral Health Institutes. In the last 50 years, we've learned about how our brains can develop than in all the thousands of years of human development because of brain imaging, because of our discovery of DNA. Why aren't we taking that information and helping people and unfortunately, a lot of people in the private sector are using it to make money. Nothing wrong with it. But we need to know the negative consequences. Issues around depression, kids not being able to thrive and do the best. We know that David Brooks just had a great column, big fan of David Brooks, about literacy and how our literacy rates created democracy. Franklin and Adams, Jefferson wrote about it. As the printing press got developed, Franklin has an apprentice in his father's print shop in Boston. Now we know how we read affects how we retain information. And there's a wonderful neurologist at Williams College called The Shallows from 20 years ago. And he talks about their research about human skulls grew matched to where literacy grew over hundreds and thousands of years. Unfortunately, we're now seeing that human skulls are starting because of how we process information, how we store it, and how we retain that information. Those are things that we need to research, be aware of, not jump to unfounded conclusions, but be thoughtful about mental health and how we avoid crisis. Again, back to the emergence room analogy. Let's use our analytical, nonpartisan approach to problem solving to go upstream and figure out we help people with the knowledge we have. We're not dealing with crisis on a person's lifetime. And also the investment. It's just a better investment. We don't have to deal with high mental health problems, which we are in a crisis right now in the country. And a lot of research, I would attribute it to technology in the Bay Area. It was a wonderful thing. Unfortunately, it's being used in ways that are hurting young people and their mental. We've got to change.
Yeah.
That's a passion for me. And I'm trying to work with my Republican colleagues. And a lot of them realize it, but the sense of urgency I don't feel for my colleagues.
I want to pivot from policy and talk a second.
About redistricting efforts around the country and here in California.
Talk to us about how it impacts the East Bay, your congressional district, and everything else. We'll leave the politics out.
Can't talk about politics. We're doing this interview in a government.
Yeah.
And there's a very strict line. And I know people have a hard time with it, but I'm the ranking member of the ethics committee. I'll be the chair when we're in the majority, and I'm proud of it. And I hope my constituents are proud of the fact that the area is in that position. On the big approach, this country has had gerrymandering since its founding for districts, House districts, legislative districts. Most of your voters probably don't know this, but gerrymandering came from one of the founders. His name was Elbridge Gerry, and he's buried in the Congressional Cemetery, famous cemetery. Actually, his grave is close to John Philip Sousa. It's a famous cemetery in D.C. This manipulating the district lines, and we've tried to deal with it to make sure that it's as equitable as possible, reflective of the communities, and it's been a challenge since it. I am a co-author, was very involved in a bill, only have Democratic supporters, that require a national standard for every state to have independent, nonpartisan. The problem with our commissions now is they're hodgepodge. Texas doesn't have one. They can do what they want. Well, that applies to California because they decide to gerrymander based on a Supreme Court decision, again, that changed years of precedent that said basically the current Supreme Court majority, all Republican appointees, said that the federal government doesn't have a role in how states choose House districts. That opened the flood. And you can't convince me that Texas didn't know about it because within weeks, the legislature came back in a special session. And then we're doing it all over the country. All of these optics of millions of dollars, it's really simple. If Republicans really believe what they're saying, let's pass the legislation. Why aren't Republicans co-authors of this bill and not zero? A national mandate of nonpartisan, bipartisan, equal representation redistricting commission for each state. That would be the solution. And will it be perfect? No, these are human institutions with all of that applies in our history, but that's the anecdote. I have a problem with Californians having been involved with it. It's good. I had this argument when we started. Why does the minority party have 5 votes on the commission? The majority have 5 votes on the commission, and everybody else gets 4. It should be proportionate, or it should be vote. And that was a compromise that I regret being more stubborn.
All right, fair enough. What, in the closing minutes here, what other thoughts, what do you want to leave your constituents with, the people in the East Bay here?
You have to be engaged. De Tocqueville said when he wrote Democracy in America, as an observation, as a Frenchman, that amazing book, he said the basic genius of America is the belief that you can expect extraordinary things from ordinary people. Unfortunately, you can also expect the other as humans. The antidote to what we're going through is an engaged citizenry. It's not about Republicans, conservatives, liberals, progressives, or Democrats. It's people won't be fooled, and we can have a legitimate debate about individual responsibility and our social response. Hamilton and Jefferson thought about that at the founding. There's a famous story, and if the docent tells it, if you go to Jefferson's Monticello, when you walk in, Jefferson had, but it's still there. He had a bust of himself, bust of Hamilton facing him. And somebody said, why do you have Hamilton there? He disagreed on everything. And Jefferson's response was, that's why. It's that conversation we've had since before the founding of the country with citizen engagement. Stop thinking about these stupid, shallow political arguments. Get underneath. Have a conversation. And I'm proud to have that with anyone, whether they agree with me.
All right. I appreciate it, Congressman. Thank you for joining me today.
This was great. Thank you so much for asking me. Political therapy.
Wait, don't leave yet. Hit subscribe. Make sure you get the weekly updates. We have a new episode every Wednesday for stuff happening in the East Bay. In the meantime, follow me on LinkedIn, Jared Ash, or check out our firm. Wait, don't leave yet. Hit subscribe. Make sure you get the weekly updates. We have a new episode every Wednesday for stuff happening in the East Bay. In the meantime, follow me on LinkedIn, Jared Ash, or check out our firm where we have a weekly newsletter and blog at Capstone Government Affairs on LinkedIn. Thanks for joining us today on the Capstone Conversation.